Commander Adam Rourke's uniform bore the scars of countless battles, torn fabric, singed edges, and dried blood from a wound he hadn't bothered to mend. He stood firm, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room, daring any of them to dismiss him outright. His presence alone was an act of defiance in a place where humanity had always been an afterthought. The Empire's great and powerful leaders, the beings who controlled fleets that spanned galaxies, had called this meeting to entertain his warnings, though their expressions showed anything but concern. Adam took a slow breath, measuring his words. "The Tygrath Collective is coming," he said, voice steady. "They will not negotiate. They do not conquer to rule, they exterminate. I've seen entire systems burned to cinders in days. I was there when the last of Earth's 23rd Expeditionary Fleet was wiped out. We were outnumbered 10-1. They had technology far beyond ours, strategies we couldn't counter, but we fought them anyway. We fought because we had no choice." Murmurs spread through the chamber. A Vraxian warlord, his golden exoskeleton glinting under the light, leaned forward. "Your people died, human. That does not make them brave. That makes them weak." Adam barely contained his anger. Weak. He let the word hang in the air. Weak is standing here, surrounded by luxury, pretending war is an inconvenience rather than a truth of existence. Weak is underestimating an enemy because you've grown fat and complacent in your peace. My people were not weak. They were outmatched, but they did not run. They did not beg for mercy. They fought until their bones turned to dust. A ripple of silence passed through the crowd, the weight of his words unsettling even those who had come to mock him. He saw their discomfort, the way some averted their eyes. They had never known war beyond the distant echoes of history. They relied on fleets commanded by AIs, strategies dictated by logic, never by desperation, never by the sheer will to survive. The Emperor himself, Talos Vrex, sat upon a raised throne, his ornate robes flowing over the edge like a cascade of black silk. His eyes, dark and cold as the void, studied Adam with something close to amusement. "You speak as if humanity is unique in its suffering," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "War has touched us all in some form, but we have learned to avoid it. We have moved beyond the need for senseless bloodshed." Adam stepped forward, his shadow stretching long beneath the Senate's highlights. "Then you haven't faced a species that thrives on it," he said, his tone edged with something dangerous. "The Tygrath don't just kill, they hunt. They take pleasure in the slaughter. They enjoy watching civilizations crumble, not for resources, not for power, but because it amuses them. I watched them drive an entire fleet into a star for sport. I watched children incinerated in their homes because the Tygrath wanted to hear them scream. And I am telling you with every fiber of my being that if you do not prepare for war, your empire will fall in a matter of weeks." A deep, guttural laugh echoed through the chamber. One of the Serka Dominion representatives, a creature with elongated limbs and piercing violet eyes, sneered down at him. "Humans love to tell stories of their resilience, their courage. But courage does not change numbers. You were annihilated, and now you crawl here, expecting us to take up your cause?" Adam met his gaze with an intensity that made the Serka shift in his seat. "I didn't come here to beg," he said. "I came here to warn you. I came here to tell you that when the Tygrath arrive, they will not be interested in your negotiations. They will come for your worlds, your children, your lives. And when you realize too late that I was right, you will wish you had listened." A sharp huff of amusement came from behind him. Darius Cole, his oldest surviving friend, leaned against one of the great marble pillars, his cybernetic arm gleaming under the chamber's golden lights. "I don't think they believe you, Commander," he muttered just loud enough for the closest diplomats to hear. Adam exhaled slowly. He had expected this. He had expected their arrogance. It didn't make their ignorance any easier to swallow. "Tell me," he continued, turning his gaze back to the Emperor, "when was the last time you bled for your people?" Talos Vrex's expression flickered for the briefest moment, but it was enough. Adam pressed on. You sit in a throne built on the bones of the warriors who fought for this empire, and yet you speak of peace as if it will protect you. It won't. The only thing that protects you is the willingness to fight, to suffer, to bleed if necessary. That is what humanity understands. That is why we endured, why we will always endure. The chamber had fallen silent. The weight of his words pressed down on them like the pull of a dying star. But then, the emperor smiled, cold, dismissive. You have spirit, human, he said. But spirit does not win wars. Logic does. Strategy does. You fought with desperation, because you had no other options. We have options. And we will handle this in our own way. Adam felt the conversation slipping, the inevitability of their arrogance setting in. He had said all he could, laid the truth before them, and still, they would not listen. A slow dread coiled in his chest, not for himself, but for them. He straightened, his jaw tightening. I hope for your sake, he said, voice quiet but firm, that you're right. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the chamber's exit, his boots echoing against the polished floors. Darius fell into step beside him, his usual smirk absent. They're not going to listen, Darius said, rubbing at the metal plating of his cybernetic forearm. Adam glanced over his shoulder one last time. The senators were already whispering, already dismissing him, as if his warnings were the ravings of a man broken by war. No, Adam said, his voice cold with certainty. And they'll pay the price? Adam Rourke had seen this before. He had seen the prelude to annihilation, the calm before an enemy descends like a storm that devours everything in its path. He stood aboard the bridge of the ironclad, watching sensor readings flicker with increasing dread. Tygrath ships were coming, not in scouting waves, not in skirmish formations, but in numbers that blotted out the void. Darius Cole leaned over the console beside him, his cybernetic fingers tapping impatiently against the edge of the screen. Tell me again, he muttered, why are we here? Watching these bastards die was not high on my list of things to do today. Adam barely glanced at him. Because we warned them, and because, when the Tygrath burned this planet to the ground, someone has to be left to fight back. The transmission came through, a priority distress signal from Xeris Prime. The voice belonged to Admiral Kale Sories, one of the Empire's most decorated military tacticians, now reduced to frantic shouting. This is Admiral Sories. We are under full-scale attack. Imperial fleets are unable to hold. Our defenses are failing. We need immediate, a screech of static cut through the message, followed by a sound Adam knew all too well. The deep, thrumming roar of Tygrath bombardments, turning entire districts to firestorms. The first explosions bloomed on the planet's surface. From the ironclad's vantage point, the destruction unfolded like a slow-moving nightmare. Orbital stations, unprepared and unmanned, were torn apart by Tygrath kinetic rounds. Ships launched from the Imperial docks in frantic, uncoordinated waves, only to be vaporized before they could reach formation. The so-called indomitable empire had spent so many centuries at peace that it had forgotten how to wage war. Adam watched unblinking. He had warned them. They had laughed. Darius exhaled sharply. So, what's the call, Commander? We could turn tail and let them drown in their own arrogance. Or we could do something really stupid. Adam's jaw tightened. He had no love for the Empire. He had no reason to fight for men who had mocked him, dismissed him, left his people to die. But there was something deeper than vengeance in him, something forged in the fires of war. Bring us in, he said. The ironclad surged forward, engines burning hot as it cut through the battlefield. The human crew aboard the vessel, hardened soldiers who had survived the fall of Earth's fleet, fell into their battle stations without hesitation. They had lived this nightmare before. They had nothing left to lose. The enemy came into view, their warships bristling with weaponry beyond Imperial understanding. Tygrath vessels were dark, jagged things, pulsing with eerie blue light, moving with a predatory grace. They didn't fight for control or resources. They fought because they enjoyed it. Admiral Sores's broken fleet was crumbling. Adam picked up the distress signal again, his voice a shattered thing. Any Allied ships, if you can hear this, we need. Another explosion cut him off. Adam's fingers curled into fists. Open comms, he ordered. A flicker. Then Sores's bruised and bloodied face appeared on the screen. His pristine uniform was stained with soot, and the fear in his eyes was something he had never been trained to handle. He had spent his career in the comfort of simulations, theories, battle games that never accounted for the sheer chaos of real war. Adam met his gaze with the cold precision of a soldier who knew exactly what was coming. "You should have listened," Adam said. Sores swallowed hard. We can still hold. If we regroup at the southern quadrants." "There is no we anymore, Admiral." Adam's voice was ice. "Your fleet is dead. Your planet is burning. You have minutes, not hours." Sores's mouth opened, but before he could speak, a Tygrath battleship descended through the atmosphere like a fallen god. Its cannons unleashed torrents of energy that carved through entire blocks of the imperial capital. Cities crumbled. The imperial palace, once a beacon of power, collapsed in a single, blinding burst of flame. The emperor was dead. The empire had no one left to command it. Adam turned to his crew. "Deploy strike teams to extract what survivors we can. Get them aboard, then we leave." Darius gave a low whistle. "We're really saving these bastards?" "Not all of them," Adam muttered. "Just the ones who might be useful." The ironclad descended into the chaos, its hull rattling as debris and stray fire pelted against its shields. Drop ships launched from its bays, streaking toward the ground like falling stars. Adam and Darius led the first team, touching down in the shattered remains of the Senate district. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burning bodies. Civilians ran in every direction, some screaming, some already too broken to make a sound. Imperial officers, once proud and unshakable, staggered through the wreckage, their eyes hollow. They had never known fear like this. Darius pulled a soldier to his feet, shaking him hard. "Where's your command?" he demanded. The man could barely form words. "Gone. They're all gone." Adam scanned the ruins, his mind calculating coldly. This was no longer a war. It was a slaughter. A transmission crackled through his earpiece. "Commander, hostiles inbound, on your position." He turned just in time to see the Tygrath warriors descend. They were monstrous things, their exoskeletal bodies wrapped in dark plating, their elongated limbs twitching with eerie anticipation. Their faces were expressionless, but their black, pupilless eyes gleamed with something Adam recognized all too well. Hunger. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They attacked. The battle was brutal, chaotic. Adam moved on instinct, his rifle cutting through the darkness, each shot precise and merciless. Darius fought like a demon, his cybernetic arm crushing skulls, his blade flashing as he tore through the enemy ranks. Blood, human and alien, spattered the broken ground. But there were too many. A Tygrath lunged at Adam, faster than anything he had faced before. He barely managed to twist away, but the creature's claws raked across his shoulder, slicing deep. Pain flared through his body, but he gritted his teeth and drove his knife into the thing's throat. They fell back, barely reaching the extraction point as Tygrath forces swarmed over the wreckage. The survivors they had managed to pull from the ruins clung to their rescuers, their faces numb with shock. As the ironclad pulled away from the planet, Adam stood at the viewport, watching Xeris Prime die. Entire continents were engulfed in flames. The great seat of power in the galaxy was no more. Darius stood beside him, breathing hard. "Well," he muttered, "they sure as hell paid the price." Adam didn't answer. His mind was already on the next step. The Empire was dead. The Tygrath had made sure of that. But the war was far from over. The galaxy had turned its back on humanity. Now, humanity would decide its own fate. The dead world of Kartos 9 stretched beneath the cold glow of distant stars, its surface a barren wasteland of craggy rock and forgotten ruins. Once a thriving colony, it had long been abandoned, left to the ghosts of war and the endless, howling winds that whispered through its desolation. Now, it was humanity's last refuge. Adam Rourke stood on the outcrop overlooking the makeshift base, a collection of scavenged Imperial freighters, half-buried bunkers, and a shield generator barely holding against the planet's violent dust storms. It was nothing compared to the great fleets that once bore the human banner, but it was something. And something was enough. Darius Cole approached from behind, his cybernetic arm whirring softly as he adjusted a rifle slung across his back. "I still think this is insane," he muttered, stopping beside Adam. "The Tigrath crushed the Empire like an afterthought, and now we're going to take them on with what? A few thousand men and whatever scrap we pulled from the wreckage." Adam didn't look away from the horizon. "It's not about winning," he said. "Not in the way they expect. The Tigrath assume we're beaten, that we'll hide in the dark and wait to die. That's their mistake." Below, the remnants of humanity moved through the camp. Former Imperial officers, now stripped of their rank, exiled soldiers who had lost their homes, engineers, medics, smugglers who had nowhere left to run. They were not an army. Not yet. But Adam had seen what desperation could forge. A voice crackled over the comms, breaking the silence. "Commander, we've intercepted a Tigrath patrol 2 clicks from the outer perimeter. Orders." Adam tightened his grip on the railing. "Send a strike team. No survivors." Darius exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "We used to fight for survival. Now we're hunting them. They won't give us mercy," Adam said. "So we don't offer any." The mission was swift. Adam led the assault himself, his rifle cold against his shoulder as he and his men moved like shadows through the jagged terrain. The Tigrath patrol, a small reconnaissance unit, never saw them coming. The humans struck with brutal efficiency, gunfire tearing through their exoskeletal armor, blades finding the weak points between their plates. Within minutes, the enemy lay still, their bodies sprawled across the rock like discarded insects. Darius wiped his blade against his sleeve. "Feels different," he muttered. Adam met his gaze. "It is different." They stripped the Tigrath corpses of anything useful, weapons, armor plating, data cores from their suits. Every advantage counted. Back at the base, their tech teams pored over the recovered materials, breaking down what little they could understand of the enemy's communications and battle tactics. That night, as the fires burned low, Adam gathered the men. They stood in a loose circle, their faces hardened, some still raw from the losses they had endured. Among them was Commander Ryan Locke, a former Imperial officer who had been stationed on Xeris Prime before its fall. His uniform was still pristine, but his eyes held none of the certainty he once carried. "We can't keep this up forever," Locke said, arms crossed over his chest. "Hit-and-run tactics only delay the inevitable. If we don't find a way to cripple their war machine, we're just gnats buzzing around a monster's ear." Adam nodded, his gaze sweeping over the gathered soldiers. "Which is why we take the fight to them." Silence met his words. The very idea was madness. The Tigrath had torn through the strongest fleets in the galaxy. What could a few thousand men do against that? Locke scoffed. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious," Adam said. "We've spent too long reacting. We need to strike first." Darius let out a low chuckle. "Let me guess, you've got some suicidal plan?" Adam's lips twitched. "I always do." They gathered around the holomap, the blue projection flickering as it displayed the Tigrath's key strongholds. One in particular stood out, a command station orbiting a lifeless moon near the galactic core. Intelligence suggested it housed a primary link to the Tigrath's Hive network, a communication relay that coordinated their war efforts across dozens of systems. Destroying it wouldn't win the war, but it would throw the Tigrath forces into temporary disarray. And in war, chaos was an advantage. Locke shook his head. "We don't have the firepower." "We don't need firepower," Adam countered. "We need precision. We infiltrate, plant charges at the core of the station, and blow it sky high." The room was silent. The mission was impossible. And yet, for the first time since the fall of the Empire, there was something in their eyes that wasn't despair. Darius grinned. "Well, hell, if we're gonna die, might as well make it memorable." The preparations were swift. The fleet, if it could even be called that, consisted of salvaged Imperial transports, repurposed cargo ships, and a handful of warships that had barely survived their last engagements. The men trained day and night, running simulations, memorizing the layout of the Tigrath station, rehearsing every movement until instinct took over. The night before departure, Adam sat alone in the command room, staring at the old insignia of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet burned into his shoulder plate. It was faded, almost unrecognizable, like the people it once represented. Darius sat across from him, setting a bottle of something strong between them. "We don't come back from this, do we?" he asked, voice quiet. Adam didn't answer. Darius sighed, pouring 2 glasses. "Figured as much." He lifted his drink. "To the dumb bastards who didn't run when they had the chance." Adam smirked, clinking his glass against Darius's before downing the drink in one go. Morning came too soon. The fleet launched under the cover of darkness, slipping through the cracks in the Tigrath's vast patrol routes. The enemy had grown complacent, their victories turning into routine slaughter. They did not expect resistance. They did not expect humans to be anything but remnants clinging to the edges of extinction. That was their mistake. The ironclad led the charge, engines burning as they broke into enemy-controlled space. The station loomed ahead, a towering construct of blackened metal, its surface bristling with defense turrets and patrol ships. But Adam and his men had learned from the Empire's failures. They did not fight fair. The attack was surgical. Explosions ruptured across the station's hull as strike teams infiltrated its corridors, moving with lethal precision. Gunfire echoed through the halls. Blood, human and alien, streaked across the walls. Adam led the final push to the station's core, his rifle barking fire as he cut down Tigrath soldiers in his path. Darius was right beside him, grinning like a man with nothing left to lose. Locke, however, fell. One moment he was covering their flank, the next a Tigrath blade tore through his chest. He choked on his own blood, collapsing against the metal floor. Adam knelt beside him, gripping his arm. "We're finishing this," he said. Locke coughed, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Damn right you are." Then he was gone. They reached the core, planting the charges. The timer counted down. They had 3 minutes. The sprint back to the ships was a blur. The Tigrath had finally realized what was happening, but it was too late. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, the station erupted behind them, a shockwave tearing through the void. Humanity had struck back. Adam stood on the bridge, watching the flames die in the distance. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something far greater. The void of space was silent, but the storm was coming. Adam Rourke stood at the bridge of the ironclad, staring at the holomap of their final target, Narvas, the Tigrath homeworld. A planet of darkness. Its surface was a network of jagged spires and colossal hive structures, pulsing with eerie blue light. It was here that the Tigrath hive lords ruled. It was here that humanity would make its last stand. Darius Cole adjusted the grip on his sidearm, his cybernetic fingers twitching in anticipation. "I keep thinking we should have turned back 5 suicide missions ago," he muttered. "But here we are." Adam didn't look away from the map. "If we don't end it now, it never ends." Their last mission had crippled the Tigrath war machine, throwing their fleets into chaos. Now was the only chance to strike before they regrouped. The plan was simple if reckless. infiltrate any Arvas, breach the central command hive, and kill the hive lords. The Tigrath operated on a linked intelligence system. Without their central leadership, the coordination of their entire war effort would collapse. Their fleet was small, barely enough to be called an armada. Less than 100 ships, mostly stolen, repurposed wrecks, piloted by the last remnants of humanity and whatever ex-imperials still had the stomach for war. No reinforcements. No fallback. Just one final mission. A message flashed across the bridge, approaching enemy space. The time had come. Darius exhaled slowly. Well, help. No point in waiting. The fleet surged forward, slipping past the outer Tigrath defenses in the wake of a dying star's radiation burst. It was a narrow window, one the Tigrath never thought to guard because no species had ever been suicidal enough to use it. As the first ships entered orbit, alarms blared. The Tigrath had detected them. Fighters launched from the surface, sleek, insectoid ships that moved like predatory birds, converging on the human fleet. The first engagement was brutal. Ships on both sides erupted into flame, their hulls tearing apart under relentless barrages. The humans fought with desperation, their attacks surgical, targeting critical systems rather than engaging in direct combat. The Tigrath outnumbered them, but they didn't understand unpredictability. They didn't understand rage. Adam piloted his strike team's dropship through the chaos, weaving between burning wreckage. The capital hive loomed ahead, its massive black spires stretching into the void, wreathed in electric storms. That was their target. Missiles streaked toward them. Darius cursed, gripping the sides of his seat. Brace. The ship lurched as an explosion tore through the hull. Metal screamed. Red warning lights flickered. They were hit but not down. Adam gritted his teeth and forced the controls steady, eyes locked on the landing zone. They crashed through the outer perimeter, the ship skidding across the blackened ground before grinding to a stop. Before the dust had settled, the team was already moving. The air was thick with static energy and the sickly scent of something ancient and rotting. The hive entrance loomed before them, a massive, pulsating structure of dark, organic metal. No doors, no windows, just an opening like the gaping maw of a beast. Darius tightened his grip on his rifle. I hate this place. Adam nodded. Then let's burn it down. They moved in formation, sweeping through the corridors with ruthless efficiency. The walls breathed, shifting with unnatural movement, as if the hive itself were alive. Shadows twisted in the dim, bioluminescent glow. Then the Tigrath came. They erupted from the walls, their elongated limbs moving faster than thought, their black eyes gleaming with hunger. The air filled with the sound of gunfire and the shrieks of dying creatures. Adam's blade found the throat of one, its blood sizzling as it hit the floor. Darius fought like a man possessed, his cybernetic arm crushing skulls with brutal force. The deeper they pushed, the heavier the resistance became. They were expected. A blast caught Commander Ryan Locke in the side. He stumbled, coughing blood, but still raised his weapon. Adam grabbed him, dragging him behind cover. You hold here, Adam ordered. Locke shook his head, grimacing. We both know I don't make it out of this. Adam clenched his jaw. Then make it count. Locke nodded, a ghost of a smirk on his lips. You better finish this. He rose from cover, rifle blazing, drawing the enemy fire. Adam didn't look back. The hive lords waited at the core. The chamber was vast, a cavern of towering pillars and cascading streams of raw energy. Suspended above the ground in dark, pulsating cocoons were the three hive lords, their forms twisted, their intelligence vast beyond comprehension. They regarded Adam with something close to amusement. You are the last. The voice was not spoken. It echoed inside his skull, layered and alien, drilling into his mind like a needle. Adam stepped forward, blood staining his uniform. He had fought his whole life for this moment. You should have killed me when you had the chance. The Hive Lords laughed. Then the chamber exploded into motion. A wall of Tygrath soldiers emerged, their forms blending with the shifting architecture, moving as an extension of the hive itself. Adam and his remaining men fought with everything they had, cutting down enemies with sheer force of will. Darius was beside him, his breath ragged, his blade drenched in alien blood. "Tell me you have a plan." Adam yanked a detonator from his belt. "I do." He tossed it toward the central energy core. The Hive Lords shrieked in realization, their cocoons beginning to split open. Too late. The charges detonated. The room became fire. Adam felt the shockwave rip through him, lifting him off his feet. The Hive Lord screams tore through his mind before they were silenced, their forms dissolving in the inferno. The hive began to collapse. Darius grabbed Adam, dragging him toward the exit as the walls caved in. Their men were either dead or too far to reach. There was no saving anyone else. They barely made it outside before the entire structure imploded, a black sun folding in on itself, consuming everything. The Tygrath fleet hesitated. Without their lords, without their guiding intelligence, their formations faltered. Then, one by one, their ships began to break apart, the hive connections severed, their coordination gone. The human fleet pressed the attack, turning the tide in a way that had never before been possible. The Tygrath were dying. Adam lay on the cracked ground, staring up at the burning sky. His breath was shallow, his body broken. He had never expected to survive this mission. Darius knelt beside him, grinning despite the blood smeared across his face. "You're not dying yet," he muttered. "We've got too much to do." Adam coughed, a weak laugh escaping him. "We won?" Darius glanced up as the Tygrath ships fled, a sight no human had ever seen before. "Yeah," he said. "We did." Across the galaxy, the message spread. The Tygrath are broken. The war has turned. Humanity still stands. Adam closed his eyes, exhaustion washing over him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe.